Hey Tash.
Hi there, how are you doing?
Good, good. How are you?
I'm good, thank you. Svi will
Nice.
be joining me shortly as well.
Sure, no worries. Nice to see you finally face to face
A-
after all the emails.
Absolutely. Exactly. Yeah, all good. All
Um,
good.
where are you calling in from?
Markham. So,
Okay, okay, cool. That's
as
great.
long as my internet holds up, I think we're in reasonably close proximity.
Yeah, that's great. That's awesome. Just gonna check how many signups I
Sure.
got. So
Other work,
we're
other
yeah, so we're at
workshops?
35, so that's pretty good.
Okay.
Um, yeah,
Okay.
so we'll wait.
I'm surprised actually. Yeah, I thought usually the attendees tend to favor the main event, and it's good for workshop level interaction. There is this kind of an uptake.
Yeah, yeah. So the workshops are they actually do tend to do really well because I think the people want that hands-on one-to-one, right? Like which you don't get that in
At the
a
main
typical.
conference platform.
Yeah, so the workshops actually do tend to do really well.
Oh, that's good.
Well, I think we
Excellent.
see like 95% signups from the people who are coming to the conference at
Into
the
the
workshop.
conference, into this. Okay, that's great.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think perhaps we were thinking for the next session we could
Mhm.
actually maybe even make this a bit more hands-on, like
Mhm.
share some. We didn't have enough time to share some data
Mhm.
ahead of time so that we can actually walk through the data in an interactive
Right.
manner,
Yeah.
allow the participants to download the data, kind of walk through with us, just to get a feel for it. And it's a great way for us to understand who is in the audience that's interested and latching on, which is a very valuable
Right.
source for us.
Yeah,
So
yeah.
we'll do that next time for sure.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. Yeah, so the workshops, they tend to be kind of on the lower end, I guess if you can call it, is like 1 hour, and on the
Okay.
higher scale is like 4 hours, right? So,
Oh, okay.
and then those 4 hours, they do tend to be like very hands-on, like where you are running through a notebook or you're
Yeah.
going through code, like literally step by step. So in the future, we can set it up in a way that will give all of the information prior to the workshop to the attendees.
Yes. Yes.
So that way, if we do need to give access to notebooks or cloud servers or whatever, so we can.
Correct. Correct. Okay. Awesome. Yeah, we
Yeah,
can definitely explore that.
that's great.
And I'll see if I know he was attending another parallel session right now.
Mhm.
Uh, so I'll just double check. Because I think we'll probably attempt to present from his laptop, but if that doesn't work out, I'll present. So it should
Sounds
be
good.
okay.
Yeah, sounds good.
I think. Yeah, I'm going to just send him the meeting link. I think he might have had some minor. All right.
Guys,
This we.
Hey, how's it going?
good.
Good. Nice to see you again.
Same here.
Uh,
Unfortunately, the sessions are scheduled to overlap, so it was a good session at from Ali at Cyclica.
all right, yeah. We do have the recording, so we'll send that over to you and pass as well too.
Cool. That'll be awesome.
Right. So I'll give you both co-hosting rights, and then we'll just do like a quick tech check just to make.
Yeah. I was just trying to because it's actually Ali's. Yeah, it's like you were disabled, so that's
Yeah,
exactly what happened at his session.
yeah. Okay. So you both would now have co-hosting rights. So if you want to just try presenting, and then we'll just make sure it's okay.
Mm-hmm.
So let's try. Right now, can you see?
Yep.
Yeah, and it's
If
the
you don't mind.
presentation screen.
Oh, sorry, go ahead.
No, no.
Oh yeah, yeah. So if you just don't mind, just going to a couple of slides. Yep, good.
Yeah, I know there is only one point where I want to just double check a few things. So these ones are actually interactive.
And
So
it's
you
showing
can,
the browser.
it's actually showing the map, and now the map is moving and stuff. Okay.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
So that's the diabetes in the GTA. Okay.
Are you able to go
go back? Yeah, to go back, I think all I need to do is close it.
Right.
And I have the same thing here. I don't know if we'll go into showing all the details, but we'll have it open. How many people registered for?
35 so far. So.
25.
Oh no, sorry. Now it's actually gone up. It's 38 now. So. Cool. So I'll recommend we start like 2 minutes after 2:30. I'll just come on, and then I'll just give you the virtual mic to both of you, and then you can just run with the workshop.
Okay, so you'll introduce both of us, and then we'll introduce ourselves, and then we'll anyway we won't start the actual thing until probably after all the introduction, 2, 3, 4, 5 minutes, whatever, and then we'll
Yeah.
go
So
into the...
I don't have the bios.
We can do.
I was thinking if you just want to do your own intros, if that's okay.
Yeah, that's good.
No problem.
Cool.
And for questions, probably Taz will be the best person to monitor the chat while I'm presenting to summarize question. So we have it's kind of a modular structure that we can stop in between for questions in the interim.
That's great. Yeah. I'm still going to be the session. So if you need any help or assistance, I can come back on as well.
Yeah, that'd be great. Yeah, if there are questions, maybe more. Yeah, I don't know. We'll see what kind of. Usually the questions are pretty on point. But...
And towards the end for us, you will take control. Is that right?
Yeah. So just towards the end, once you guys on the final slide, I'll just come back on, say a quick thank you, and then we can close the meeting after.
Nice.
And you, I mean, if we forget to promote, or maybe in the introduction, you should say that Labla is one of the sponsors, and we'll have a booth tomorrow as well to answer questions, etc.
Yeah. I'm just going to mute myself, and we'll come back on like 2 minutes after.
Atas, I already saw a person introduce himself in the previous session. He's a new recruit in Trevor Stream. You're muted.
That's interesting. He's probably the systems engineer.
Yeah, I invited him to join this session, so
Nice.
he'll get an info. He's starting next week, he said.
Ah, okay.
So you see how committed he is on his own time.
I know. Very impressive. Very impressive.
And the first talk I don't know if you had a chance to join, but the one at 11 was about a bias in healthcare, which is very very relevant. He's a researcher.
Impressive. Yeah, I saw the abstract. Did not get around to jump out of a meeting to join that.
Hello, everyone. Those of you just joining, we're going to start in about 4 minutes. Hello, everyone. Those of you joining, we're going to start in about 2 minutes. Okay, so I think we can get started if you're ready.
Excellent.
Awesome.
Oh,
Great.
nice. Hello, everybody. Thank you for joining this workshop, part of the ML in Healthcare Summit tomorrow. Just a quick note that you would have received an email from Hopin for access to the summit tomorrow. If you haven't received them, please do send me a message in the chat, or you can send me an email for us at tronomachineLearning.com. And I just also wanted to say a quick word to our sponsor, also Loblaws. They will also be hosting a booth tomorrow, so please do visit them in the booth as well too. So with that, I'm going to hand over the virtual mic to both the speakers.
Awesome. Great. Thanks for us. Good afternoon, everyone. It's at least a gloomy afternoon here, but hey, a fun-filled afternoon as far as I'm concerned. My name is Das Yuvaraj. I'm the Senior Director of R&D within Loblaw. It's a specific R&D group that's focused in health applications. I hold a PhD in biomedical engineering and spent the past 15 years helping transition medical device technologies from laboratory concepts all the way through to commercialization with this in-between hurdle called regulatory approval. So that's been sort of my journey and where I am now at Loblaw, heading up this R&D group. Gives me great pleasure to be sharing this virtual podium with Svi, who is actually a lot more present in these TMLS events, and most of you might be already familiar with him. And he's a colleague of mine at Loblaw. And I'll pass this mic back to Svi to do his intro. Go ahead, Svi.
Thank you, Tas, for the introduction. Similar to Tas, I also have a PhD from the University of Toronto, working on actually structures of protein. Those of you who came from the session at Cyclica, these are the kind of problems that I was studying rigorously at my PhD. After I finished the PhD, I went to the Hospital of Sick Children to try to apply what I learned in the PhD in the world of drug discovery, and worked on problems related to brain tumors, glioblastomas, medulloblastomas, trying to merge data sets from different sources and trying to get to molecules, promising molecules for therapeutics. I left the Hospital of Sick Children and did an MBA at Ryerson with a focus on technology and innovation, trying to understand the business drivers of innovation and what kind of innovation goes from the lab to the market, and what are the forces that shape innovation adoption at the market. And after I finished the MBA, I was fortunate to work on a number of projects as a freelancer. Some of them were with pharmaceutical companies, but there was a string of projects with Syngenta, is a seed manufacturer, that led me to a project to try to predict yields in soybean fields, and a project that was awarded the first place in a KDD conference in 2017. And led me kind of on a mission of trying to get machine learning in the context of problems that are facing corporates in the life science space. And eventually I found myself a year ago at Loblaw, going back to my core competencies around healthcare and machine learning, and trying to apply it to the large data sets within the Loblaw umbrella, as you'll hear in the talk. So the way we divided this talk is to present to you some of the underlying structures and the way we organize ourselves as a data science team, because we work as a team, not as individuals. And after that, this will be presented by Tath. And after that, I'll come back and talk about specific insights that we gather from our studies of cardiometabolic disease patients. And we have a lot of them, because these are such a common diseases that we're just bound to have many of these patients within our network. So we're trying to learn from the past patterns of treatments and behaviors in these patients, to try to improve the way we treat or provide services and treatments for these patients.
Great. All right, so perfect. Thanks, V. I'll cover this initial set here. So most of you are familiar with Loblaw, clearly, particularly with sort of what we call the banners, the labels on the right half of this word cloud, if you will, or trade name cloud, such as Loblaw, PC Express, PC Finance, Joe Fresh. There is another aspect to it, which is the set of banners that you see on the left of this collection, which is largely bannering up under the Shoppers Drug Mart banner, which was acquired by Loblaw. And that you're again quite familiar with Shoppers Drug Mart itself, but there are a few entities that kind of banner up underneath that, which span a lot broader health spectrum beyond prescription dissemination, which is Medisystems, which relate to drug manufacturing itself, other supportive technologies provided through Wellwise, and also there are specialty entities that provide services to long-term facilities. And another aspect of it is an infrastructure provider who acts as the conduit for information transfer between health providers. That's QHR. And the net result of all of this is a plethora of business units with various access to the various access to different customer base as well. So if we move to the next slide, what you're going to see is um, there is this large wealth of data and business units that interact in a cohesive manner. And to surface some of the solutions, we have structured ourselves within data science at Loblaw under various verticals spanning, again, what you would see in a typical data heavy, data native company such as data engineering, a whole group of units that are focused on customer insights. But then there is business intelligence, privacy form an integral piece as well. And since our brick and mortar business is largely transactional, we have a pricing team as well. But last but not least, there is a separate sliver or a grouping within data science that focuses on data science health. That is the group where Svi and I reside, and our aim is to leverage and work in partnership with these other entities to surface solutions as well. And again, so you have this business units, you have this various verticals who are well positioned to leverage and support the business units. What that allows us to do is ask some very foundational questions that impact Canadians every day. How may we, for example, empower our customers to manage their health better? And then if you take another subgroup within our customer population, those who suffer from chronic diseases, how may we empower the chronic disease patients to manage their health and ultimately live life well, which happens to be our motto as well. So that you can think of it as our primary driver. And we try to meet these challenges not, as we just mentioned, as individuals, but instead by embracing design thinking as a foundational mechanism. And in the next slide, we show you, again, a design thinking approach for those who are familiar with design thinking. It's probably coming up in the following slide, but maybe as a precursor to that design thinking, I just wanted to highlight one additional aspect, which is what are the sort of the business setup and the structure that sets us quite well for using design thinking. And that's the following. We have multiple business units. Almost all of them have a direct or an indirect touch point with our customers every day. Each of these business units have different channels to access the customers. So by channels, I mean different mechanisms by which they touch, impact, affect lives of customers. And this then presents some interesting constraints for us to pursue. So as software scientists, data scientists, we have to take a channel agnostic view. However, we cannot ignore the channel itself. Each of the channels come with their own constraints. And last but not least, you're sitting on a wealth of data. So the challenge that we face is not only how do we chase after these grandiose questions, but how do we enable and work effectively with multiple business units in an agile manner. And that's actually what's presented in the next slide, where we illustrate our standard design thinking methodology. For those of you are familiar with design thinking, this should not be anything new. We start with some early insights. So we not only look at data at the very beginning, but we sit and have those early conversations with our internal stakeholders. These stakeholders, again, are business units. Some of them are people who are playing the role of a business leader, but had traditionally played the role of, say, a dietitian, a pharmacist. So all of these people have had that hands-on domain knowledge and bring it into the business practice. We engage with them to craft some how may we questions, then use some early insights to build models to go back and challenge our problem statements. That's the next block you see. So it's an iterative process. Once you have crafted your problem and developed an early model, then you're able to figure out, do I have enough signal in my data? If not, how do I flag, identify, and bring in these additional data sources, internal and external? Again, we assess the quality, the validity of such data by tightly integrating with our business partners, our stakeholders, leading to a model development, which then gets brought up to a point what we call a proof of concept. We don't pretend to be the production engineers. Instead, we have an enablement arm that then takes such solutions that have been now technologically and clinically de-risked to a state that can be now integrated into a medical device, non-medical device, or any other solution that can then be customer facing. So it's that iterative model that we follow that is very integral to our way of thinking, way of communicating with other business units. That's the process or the methodology, if you will, that we follow. And we follow that by creating our teams in a way that can support or leverage the many enablers that we have. So one of the key enablers is the aspect of multidisciplinary teams. Svi comes from a strong life sciences background, myself from an engineering background. We have a good mix of similarly chemists and mathematics majors in our group. And the idea is to embrace that multidisciplinary nature in each of our teams. And we are growing as a team of teams. By that, what I mean is we are embracing a pod structure where each pod has the luxury of focusing on a specific problem. Each pod has some team members who are native to the pod. This would be the data scientist and the data scientist with a data engineering flavor in their skill set. This is the proverbial data wrangler, if you will. And along with that, we have others who come into the pod in a supporting role, whether it's a technical lead who comes in and provides the right infrastructure know-how for the team to stand up a right infrastructure for a particular problem, the data science lead who brings in and ensures that the ML practices are consistent across the pods and acts as a force multiplier to ask the right questions for each of the pods to unstick them, if you will, from sticky problems. And then there is an important role which is called technical program manager. As we mentioned before, we interact with our business units, and that link with the business unit is ever so vital. Currently, Svi and I kind of play a shared role in taking that kind of a connection, keeping it alive. It's not scalable, so we are scaling it by bringing in this concept of a technical program manager who acts as the voice of the customer within the pod and goes out and connects with the business units on a regular basis and keeps that connection alive throughout the whole exercise. And this pod structure allows us to scale so that should more projects come in, more problems come in, we can scale the pods to appropriately meet the demands. Last but not least, we don't pretend to be the know-it-alls. We value the strong scientific and research know-how that exists in academia. So we leverage that by reaching out on a per pod, per problem basis and interacting with academic partners to bring in that help, that expertise as part of the problem solutions. And that's yet another key enabler that's a vital part of our entire pod model. So this is an illustration of the process, the group, that comes together. And I believe the best way to illustrate this is actually to go through some sample challenges. They are largely illustrative in nature and early insights, but we figured we'll share with you to kind of show where we are heading so that we can share that excitement with you as well. So with that, I will pass the virtual mic to you, Svi, and I'll watch for any questions.
Thank you, Tav. And if there are any questions on the org structure, or it's a small group here, so we can let people ask in the chat, and Tav will either answer now, or do you see anything that you want to answer now, or save it for later? If there are no comments, then we'll go into this. So in this part of the talk, they are preliminary insight and designed to be on the disease that we study, but on purpose we removed the business implications around them, or just showing the demographics of the diseases. Again, as part of the benefit would be just for awareness of the people, and also to kind of showcase the way we extract insight out of lots of transactions and data that is like I think in any other large organizations, typically messy data. And so why to even bother with cardiometabolic disease? What are they? Why they are important? So this is kind of an umbrella name for a family of diseases that are related to each other. So we're talking about hypertension, high blood pressure, a very common disease. About almost 30% of Canadians estimated to suffer from high blood pressure. Dyslipidemia, high cholesterol, again, very common disease or condition. And diabetes type 2 specifically, which is about 10% prevalence in Canada. So all of them together represent diseases that are have a large impact. So they impact cardiac health, which is the second most common mortality cause in Canada. And also, so if we can treat them, we can extend life, which is the most important thing. But also, these diseases carry large costs and large bills to the Canadian healthcare system. And again, if we can improve the way we treat these patients, again, avoid surgeries, avoid hospital admissions, we can have a large impact on the healthcare system in Canada, and which is a public healthcare system, which we all pay through our taxes this cost. So there is kind of a triple win here if we can improve the way we treat these patients. Benefit for the patients, benefit for the system, but also benefit for our company as a business as well. Another reason why we like these diseases is because they're interconnected to each other. So they could be seen as diseases on similar spectrum, where factors like food quality, nutrition, eating activity plays a role. Things like age, race, gender, family history, and all of them play similar role. So there is a lot of fundamental similarities within these diseases, yet they are distinct. Like the therapeutics right now, especially on the molecular side, are distinct for each one of these diseases. So it's an interesting field to be in when it comes to trying to marry data science practices with clinical practice, because we have a lot of these patients. They behave in certain patterns that are semi-predictable, but also there are ways that we believe that we can leverage the ability of data science and sophisticated algorithm to track better disease progress, disease progression, and also health outcome of these diseases in this particular cluster of diseases. And lessons that we learn here probably will be relevant to other diseases with certain changes that we'll have to do. And the way we gather information about these diseases is internally through mostly through our pharmacy records, because As you guys know, we're the leading pharmacy network. There are 1,800 pharmacies within our network in Canada, and we also the leader grocery provider in Canada as well, with thousands of stores. So all of this together, without going into the specific of our market penetration, we have we have access to millions of transactions per week and billions per year. So out of all of this sea of transactions, we can, if we know how to, if we can identify the right patients, if we can identify the right drugs, if we can link these data sets to additional data sets, we're sitting on a treasure trove of data that we can learn a lot about the behavior of the individual, of the patients, but also the behavior of the system, the behavior of prescribers, the behavior of pharmacies, the services that are being provided, and how what is the response of people to services. So there are a lot of studies that we can do to shed light into behaviors in this domain. And overall, the overall hypothesis or assumption in all of our work is that because the risk factors are relatively understood from decades of research in this area, if we can target the specific risk factors and address them, we can improve the health outcome of the patient. So if we can go and tackle obesity and overeating and smoking cessation and lowering the blood pressure and lowering cholesterol, and doing it all of it for the individual level, personalized treatment, kind of precision medicine, we can actually have a measurable impact on the life of our patients, which will lead to impact on the business itself and patient loyalty and all of the good things that come from brand recognition and brand loyalty. So that's the underlying assumption around all of the data that we'll share, and we'll share data in 3 vignettes, if you wish. So the first vignette would be geospatial analysis, looking at the disease prevalence in Canada, and this is work that was done recently by John in my team, and other team members contribute to this as well. And the overall, so the way so what are we looking at? So the data that we're looking right here is, so what John did is he took the number of people taking any prescription for the disease of interest, so in this case diabetes in blue, hyperlipidemia in green. He took the number of people taking prescriptions for the disease and divided it by the total number of people that getting any prescription for any disease within our network in 1 year, in 2019. So what you can appreciate here is, first of all, you can see the rate of treatment. So these are not necessarily the rate of a diagnosis, because we don't have the clinical records, we don't have the clinical notes, and we don't have glucose measurements, we don't have A1C, all of the diagnostic features that you typically see in this type of epidemiology studies, we don't have. What we do have is the records of people actually treated for the disease, taking medication for the disease. And already from looking at this in the provision level, you can appreciate the variations within Canada. So in Northern Territories, for example, looks like have a very high rate of treatment compared to British Columbia, just to the south. So there, again, like we not necessarily can say too much about like the drivers and the genetic of the disease or access even to therapy, but it does say that there are differences within the way provincial healthcare systems are organized from the way we see it in the real world, in the real practice of physicians writing prescription and patients taking prescriptions within the pharmacies within our networks. Another interesting insight is the concentration in both of these diseases in Atlantic Canada, in Ontario, which is interesting to study further. Also, a caveat here is that we didn't normalize for age, and it's well known that populations in Atlantic Canada and Ontario are older than populations in Alberta or British Columbia, which could lead to this higher level of treatment. So there are more adjustment and statistical adjustments that need to be taken into account in this type of analysis. And similarly, we have a similar penetration rate in hypertension treatment, and here the numbers are even higher than the overall penetration numbers in diabetes and hyperlipidemia. So, and because we have access to the addresses of patients, we can aggregate them by FSA, which FSA are the first 3 digits of the postal codes. There are about 1,000 FSAs in Canada, and then we can map them by region. And here you can get, you can see a comparison between diabetes rates or treatment rates in Alberta on the left and Ontario on the right. And kind of the most interesting pattern here is both northern Alberta and northern Ontario. It looks like have a higher treatment rates for diabetes. And we can also zoom in because this is a Toronto machine learning group. So of course we want to look at what is happening in our area. And then within the Toronto, the GTA area, you can see certain patterns of where certain FSAs that seems to have a higher rate of diabetes treatment. And even within GTA, downtown seems to be on the lower rate, and areas in Brampton, interesting, not the famous L6P that was the epicenter of COVID. It seems to be the epicenter of diabetes treatment seems to be L4T. So there are various insights that can be dug further into if we compare the attributes, the population attributes in this FSA level, or even down at the 6-digit postal codes, and try to study the epidemiology of these diseases in Canada and on our populations of patients and our pharmacies within these neighborhoods. And we have a similar mapping in dyslipidemia. Also, patterns are not identical, but similarly, concentrations, certain FSA seems to be higher for dyslipidemia treatment. And it, again, it's one of our ongoing research questions is to trying to understand what are the drivers for these diseases, and can we tie them to ethnicity, lifestyles, food intake, medicine access, access to physicians, and this type of public health determinants and attributes. And with this, if there are no questions on this part, we'll move to our studies of treatment initiation. So in this study, now these figures were prepared by Ali Mahmoud in my team. And so here are some definitions of how we define treatment initiation. So again, like as I said before, like we don't have the full clinical picture. We cannot follow glucose in the blood or blood pressure directly within the patient, like to say that certain disease started at week X or month X or even year X. But what we can do, because we have access to the prescription record, we can definitely see what is the first date that a person received a prescription for a medication that is associated with the disease of interest, and we coupling this with a filter of 120 days from the first time that we see any prescription for this person. And so we have an inclusion criteria here that we must have 120 days or more between the first time we see a prescription to the time that we see a disease-specific prescription. And we're doing this to avoid the case of people moving from one network to another, where somebody could come already with the disease, so he's not new to the disease, but he's new to our network. So we're eliminating these patients by including this filter to concentrate only on people who we believe truly start the treatment for the disease. So this is one helpful filter that we devised to look at the data a little bit with more precision. And then once we apply this filter, another transformation here that Ali is doing is normalizing. So he's counting how many people start a treatment per year, but he's also normalizing to the number of people that in general that come and get a prescription in our network. So it's another simple transformations that we're doing to set an equal steady lens on the data in terms of comparing one disease to another and comparing 1 year to another. So when you do all of this transformation, certain things come to your attention. One of them is the way the prevalence of the diseases here that we see in initiation matches, and it's not a surprise really that it matches what we saw in the previous slides when we looked at overall disease prevalence. But in the previous slides, we didn't normalize it to look at the initiation. Here we're just looking at initiation, which patients are starting with the disease per year, and then we see again higher initiation rates in hypertension versus hyperlipidemia and diabetes. But the main point of this analysis is actually to see the trend in time. And when you look at the trend in time, what is striking here is that we see a growing trend for initiations in hypertension treatment, while other diseases, either condition, hyperlipidemia and diabetes, don't have a sharp rise in the treatment rates among years. And even more striking is what we see what happened in 2020. So the year of the pandemic, we see a very sharp drop in hypertension initiation. Less people are going to our pharmacies to get a prescription to lower their blood pressure. And that's not because people suddenly started to become healthy because of the pandemic. I mean, that would be a wishful thinking. That's not likely the explanation here. So why is hypertension dropping and hyperlipidemia and diabetes is not dropping or even elevating slightly? So treatment for cholesterol is elevating, treatment for diabetes is elevating, while treatments for hypertension or starting hypertension treatments are dropping. So if you have an answer for this, you can put in the chat. If not, I'll by the end of the talk, I'll put in my explanation for that. And then we can dive into the data even more deeper by looking at gender, for example. So here Ali is separating genders in female patients versus male patients, and again looking at treatment initiation for diabetes. And once you do this again, so it's important to know that these are not actual numbers. We might have more females than males. This is the number of people starting treatment out of the total number per gender that are coming for prescription. And when you do this type of transformation, you see that first of all, you see that there are higher treatment initiation rates in males versus females, and this is something that is known from the literature as well. Diabetes have higher rates in males versus females, although it's considered that females have more complex diabetes cases. But here we're looking just at kind of the sheer impact of diabetes on males versus females when it comes to initiations. And another interesting insight here that there is a rise in the treatments for females. So females are sort of trying to catch up to males when it comes to rates of treatments, and there is more to be done here to understand the differences between gender when it comes to access to healthcare, for example, access to a physician, access to medication in general, to insurance, all kind of things that we can dive even deeper into to try to understand these differences between males and females, for example, here in the case of diabetes. And similarly, we can do this exercise in hyperlipidemia and in hypertension, and the differences between females and males is even more pronounced in hyperlipidemia compared to the other diseases. And interesting to think about what are the causes for that, and what will be the implications for trying to improve treatment for males and females, or do we, in terms of focusing our efforts on a one gender versus the other, for example. And again, like I can stop here for a question or go, and also, okay, well, why don't I go first? And
I think, Sweet, we do have a couple of good engaging questions. Could I maybe throw them in here?
yeah.
And I think they're timely at this point. So the first one from Anush is it because of diagnosing hypertension requires an in-person doctor visit? So that's his hypothesis for blood pressure measurement compared to cholesterol or diabetes, where maybe it's a blood test, as a hypothetical observation for why we see this drop in initiation of drug treatment for hypertension.
Yeah, no, so that's exactly my thought on this is exactly the same. And to iterate, like when you do to prescribe a blood pressure or hypertension medication, the physicians will likely rely on his own like measurement, like in-office measurement of blood pressure. And these unfortunately are not available through the pandemic, because we know that many physicians prefer to do on virtual consultation, and then you can't really do blood pressure monitoring when you're consulting virtually, while you can still send a person to go to the lab and draw blood and do a glucose fasting test or cholesterol test in the lab. So that's again, this was my gut feeling. Like we haven't done exhaustive study to prove this hypothesis, but one of our colleagues sent us a paper from the United States where there is somebody did notice that there is a reduction in office blood pressure measurement in the pandemic. So again, like all of the kind of, if you connect all of the dots, you can see that there is likely a stronger impact on the pandemic on hypertension medication versus and other diseases. So it's definitely you get the prize for this answer.
Interestingly, Fedor, I hope I get your last name right, Suzalev, I believe, has a more, I guess, a deeper insight. This is coming in, I believe, from the change in the whole regulatory landscape and reimbursement landscape. So this is the other part we have seen in academia as well, that is hypertension control in Canada has been in a decrease since 2010. Absolutely right, especially in the female population. Many factors you have identified: government focus around initiatives, industry's decreased interest, perhaps due to expiring drug patents, and a loss of interest in the primary care physicians. So this is an interesting observation. As we pointed out in the early parts of his slide, you're right, this is an unfortunate situation, but the fact that it is a rather complex disease that has a comorbidity with diabetes perhaps can be used as a platform to bring about that attention. That is essentially, one of the key things as we showed in that sort of a multi-connected network of that's underlying this. And you're so right, Fedor. Like if you look at reimbursement, a diabetic patient can go to a pharmacist and have their medication review done, and there's a reimbursement model for it. the hypertension piece is not as prevalent, is what I can say, across the country. Province to province, there's a difference. So you're absolutely right on that regard as well. And see any other points or observations on this sort of a longer term trend as well that we've been hearing from our pharmacy colleagues?
Yeah, no, and reimbursement is definitely an issue that we intend to study even further. And we want to study differences between United States and Canada, and one of the differences is around reimbursement. As is well known, we are in a public system when it comes to visiting the physician, but the public system doesn't cover the cost of medication, and then it's by age, right? So at least in Ontario, right? So in Ontario, if you're above 65, you get a government reimbursement. If you're under 65, it will depend on your employment situation and the type of private insurance that you have. And one of the things that we can study here is associate, and actually it will come in Jonathan's slide as well, is the having in mind the socioeconomic as a determinant of the type of treatments that you're getting. Unfortunately, that's where bias come into the picture, and it's part of healthcare everywhere, wherever you are. That if you have a car to go to see your doctor, if you don't have a doctor, or if you live in an area where there are no doctors and you need a car to see the doctor, do you need in medication coverage, like insurance coverage, all kind of determinants and features in the data that if you don't know to look for them, you'll never actually find them. So that's an example where here, even in this plot, so in this plot, what Jonathan is doing is looking again like at the initiation only at people who are starting treatment for diabetes, hyperlipidemia, and hypertension, and looking at the age and age distribution per gender per disease. So you see the age distribution from 20 to 100 in blue for females and in brown for males. And you see these patterns across the three diseases of interest. So here for the comment about insurance, because 65, at least in Ontario, and this is predominantly Ontario, you can you would have, if it was only let's say in a binary world where only if you were 65 you had government in coverage, and then you would see only 65 and above, and below 65 you won't see any coverage. So we don't see like this type of kind of very sharp distortion, and the reason is quite obvious, because most people under 65 are still in the workforce, and they have a coverage from a private insurance, and even if they're not covered by private insurance, some of them will belong to certain public coverage. So we don't see a very sharp drop in initiation below 65, for example, and the diseases are, after all, aging diseases. So we do see that for all of these diseases, there is a kind of a tail going down to even to the 80s, where people from 50 to 60 or 70 are more likely to start these diseases versus very young people under 20, let's say. Under 20, you don't see typically hypertension, hyperlipidemia, or diabetes. Another interesting observations that we notice is the differences in the distribution between females and males, and this is not necessarily a socioeconomic difference or bias in the data. A lot of it is an attribute of the clinical picture of these diseases, but it's also a reflection on the way we identify diseases, because again, as I said, we don't have the clinical notes, we don't have the actual diagnosis. What we see are the drugs. And so what happened here is after we dive a little bit to understand why we see a peak in female in their 30s, while males in their 30s don't have a peak like this in diabetes, This is a kind of a point of debate. Is this really diabetes or not? Because there are, first of all, there is the gestational diabetes. So there is diabetes in pregnancy. So the first thought was that what we see here is actually a disease within disease. So it's the diabetes, but it's a subset of diabetes that is more common in pregnancy, and which will be associated with female, not with males. So that is one explanation. Another explanation is a disease called a POC, polycystic ovary syndrome, which is actually infertility condition. But the treatment for this is a disease that is sort of semi-associated with diabetes, actually, and with insulin resistance. And one of the treatment is actually common with diabetes. So we're left with kind of a network or representation of diseases where we can see even sub diseases and the ways that they're affecting sub segments of our populations, for example. And then we can do similar analysis also on the level of the drugs that are being used to treat this type of conditions. And there we see again like different, like some commonality, but also some very, very striking differences in the distribution between male and females in this drug B or drug L, which again would maybe suggest that this is a pregnancy condition in hypertension. And similarly, we have to handle combination. So in this type of diseases, it's quite common to have not one but actually two type of medication. And recently also a pharmaceutical manufacturer are making combinations of pills that will contain at least two, sometimes even three molecules. So we have to develop or adapt machine learning methods that can handle overlapping classes of treatment if we really want to dive into this understanding of which patient gets which type of treatment or combination, and which age and which gender. And so the overall goal of our work, or so maybe start with what we saw so far in our work, is the way that just looking at the broad picture of treatment rates and how they differ across geographies in Canada. We saw treatment initiation, so how we start, or how our treatment for diseases start, and what are differences in gender or across years, and what we can learn from this, and what lessons that can be learned from this that can be reflected back for our business. So our pharmacies can because their goal is similar to ours, is just to provide better treatment for more people, and better treatment for all of the people that we can do. So, but if we dive through the data and look for this type of insight, and develop the right models that eventually led us to do it automatically to the individual level, etc., there is a great potential here to string all of these data assets together, and eventually create the models that will be key to improving the health outcomes of our customers, but also improve the health of our business, if you wish. So that's where I want to stop my presentation and leave it for more questions and answers. And of course, we're in the look for additional data scientists to join our team, to again to work with us, people that understand healthcare, understand data science, and understand the great potential of combining these two disciplines, and working with our business unit to harness these insights into the benefit of the patients and the business.
So yes, we were covering the topic around adherence. Fedor raised that point that another important part of managing blood pressure in general is the medication adherence, just due to the sheer number of medication plus the side effects and the combination thereof. So we thought that kind of spark a small conversation around how may we solve that challenge, and what if we could track adherence. And Anush, thank you for sharing your thoughts. Anush highlighted that it is not just tracking adherence, but also knowing the root causes for lack of adherence. Symptoms are definitely one aspect of it. Uh, and the means we use to track them can be different based on the demographies as well. So this is where some of the work we are doing now in Swiss team are foundational in nature, because knowing the demography starts giving some insights, the age cohorts, the distribution across the provinces, because then you can overlay other information that are regional in nature, which we have access to as taxpayers as well, and hence decide what is the best uh, mechanism, channel through which we could deliver such messages. So I know you pointed out a tech savvy customer, how they respond to adherence uh, can be very different from maybe someone who is either not in possession of the right technology or not as familiar with use of, say, mobile and social media. And this is where this problem is indeed a complex problem of having to overlay socioeconomic factors, access to technology as an integral part of solving healthcare problem. They're not the separate problems. So you're absolutely right, Anush. That mechanism is what we use internally. We say these are channels. And from a data science point of view, we try to take a scientific approach of being channel agnostic in identifying the core issues, but then the delivery ultimately depends on the channel. We can't assume one channel will fit them all.
Yeah, but and we can add the some advantage of the digital channel is this kind of online conversation, right? That is currently is lacking because there is no yeah, Facebook and Google figure it out because they created a digital platform that people can give the like immediately, or kind of you can monitor the behavior of people in almost real time. Unfortunately, in healthcare, we're kind of 10 years behind. Somebody suffer from a side effect. I don't. I'm sitting on so far from him that I don't even know. We're lucky even if he'll go to the pharmacist and tell him. That's one thing. He might not even do that, or go and tell to a doctor. He might just decide not to take the medication. Let's say that he does go and tell his doctor. There is no way for me at Labla to know that he told his doctor I suffered from side effects. If I'm getting the doctor's clinical notes, and if the doctor recorded it, maybe I can get it. Now, let's say that we encourage people to go and report their side effect to their pharmacy. Even there, we have to create the digital channel within Labla that we can actually process this data, and then maybe down the road we can say, okay, this class of medication with this type of individual, there is a large chance that this patient will suffer side effects. But again, there's so many ifs here and so many kind of infrastructure adaptations that need to happen for us to even create a project along this line. So like anything else in healthcare, there are privacy concerns and complexities and data complexities, and where will the data reside and who will get access to the data and how we protect the privacy of everybody in the supply chain. And all of this need to be solved for us to even do a kind of a data project around it. But if we can do it, and the incentives are, I believe, to do this type of things, because we can definitely tackle some of these cardinal issues of adherence, for example.
And Fedor commented on another dimension to this whole thing, which is adherence uh, is a puzzle on its own, in the sense that there is not often is there a self-recognition around adherence, meaning a doctor, when asking a patient, the patient may not accept that they have an adherence issue, uh, let alone side effects. So There is that whole psychological aspect as well around it. And this goes after the Holy Grail, which we believe is vital. That is, health outcome measures are the ultimate determinant to tell us, is there an impact? Is there an effect of the mechanism that is being delivered, the drug? I see. Manish kind of interestingly pointed out another aspect. What if a patient taking some new medication comes with yet another new prescription, and what if this prescription has side effects due to the first?
Drug interaction definitely offer interest. Again, like what we presented today was just a glimpse of a preliminary just starting point in terms of the initiation. But when it comes to progression, definitely we need to take into account multiple medications, drug interaction, genetics as well. So it's very well published from the last 20, 30 years. So there are different genomics when it comes to the way our body process medication. So let's come to aspects of dosing. Like when a doctor is dosing a patient right now for almost any disease, it's very much trial and error, where they start on a low dose and escalate the dose. But with integrating more sophisticated genetic tests, for example, there is a potential to know a priori which class of medication will be relevant for this genotype, or which dose will be the right dose to start with. So there's definitely a lot of potential to using various dimensions of data that are not even in existence today or are very limited today. But I believe that in the future, we'll see a lot of progress in this line.
Perhaps as a shameless plug for actually a service in Ontario called MedReview. Its intent is to surface such interactions as well, and obviously there are certain cohorts of patient population who get more attention just because they're more vulnerable, such as the diabetic patient population. And Monish, that's exactly it. So the government itself, as there's a recognition of that drug-to-drug interaction and the value a pharmacist can provide by presenting all the drugs that I could be on and highlighting the potential drug-to-drug interaction, taking that conversation back to the physician as well.
Gene-drug interaction, not at the moment, but it's a great topic to study for sure.
Excellent. Great conversation, by the way, around the topic. Very real. Awesome. There are no other questions for us. We will pass it back to you.
Awesome. Thank you so much for a great presentation and workshop. This is great. Seeing all the comments and the topics definitely was very interactive for sure. So thank you. And just for the attendees, just a reminder that the workshop is recorded. We will be sharing the video and the slides with the consent from the speakers. And once again, please do look for an email from Hopin for the talks tomorrow. So thank you, everybody. Thanks, everyone.